All right, Survivor Indianapolis fans, we're here to talk with our Season 5 fifth place finisher. One vote from being the first person voted out, goes all the way to fifth. Pretty similar to your buddy Ben. He was almost second voted off, made it to fourth. So apparently the trick is don't get voted off first, get voted off second, or almost.
Yeah.
And then you're good. But still, an incredible run. Cramer here. And this is I'm excited for every interview because there's so much about the game that I don't see and I don't get the chance to know, even when I'm editing all the footage, let alone on the day of the game. I know very little, honestly. And so I'm excited for all of these. But for yours specifically, because of your journey and the ups and downs that you went through throughout the entirety of the game, other than literally just one round that you did not be that you were not a part of. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And honestly, it all starts from what I've heard pre-game, actually. So for the listeners, which other than one notable exception, and the very first season, if you don't know the story of that, basically it was it was basically family only, except for 4 friends were invited. 3 of them lived on the property where we were having the game, so it was kind of like I should probably ask them to play if I'm going to use their house. And the other one was John Crabtree, who's been one of my closest friends for the last 6 or 7 years. So basically mostly family. So they all kind of knew to some extent, but they didn't know what to expect, and they weren't super competitive about it. After that, the casts have been pretty much a secret, outside of one notable exception, and that did not go very well, that exception. So you did not know about anybody that was playing, except obviously for your brother.
Right.
Well, there are some exceptions, like husbands and wives, or boyfriends, girlfriends.
Even Eli was a late addition.
He was a very late addition because we had a couple people drop out the week of. So, and I was kind of like hoping to save him for a future season. So I was excited to have him play, but he was young, and I had not cast anybody as young as him. And that's part of why I didn't initially ask him. So even for that, you couldn't have game planned more than a few days with him before the season started. But you did the morning of, before the game started. So tell us about that.
So yeah, I knew that you specifically did not want people to plan before the game. So even after Eli was officially part of it, I told him I don't want to do any planning until we get there, because I just want to be fair and I want to, stay in line with what David wants. But as soon as we stepped foot on the premises, I was game on.
Let's go. Yeah.
This is the first thing that I would tell anyone, any future players, be the first player there, because me and Eli were the first players there. So we got to have the first conversation with everyone who walked in the door. And that I didn't win, so maybe it didn't help as much as I thought it did, but there were definitely, I got to make early connections that I wouldn't have otherwise. And part of that early connection was establishing a plan early on with Eli. And my Survivor knowledge going into this is not a lot, but I'm looking at who was on there more than almost everyone else. I had only seen the first 6 seasons and then season 45 and 46. And I wanted to take my strategy off of season 46, which was the +1 alliance, where members of every tribe wanted to bring one person from their tribe into the merge, and then they would have a majority. And one notable thing that the +1 alliance did is crumble and fail immediately the entire season. But that's because the only people they would ever target was their own alliance members. So I wanted to take the concept and actually try to take it to the end and, work. And so me and Eli, I knew out the gate, we're going to be on different teams. So Eli, you find one person.
You knew that because of your assumptions, not because I said, hey,
right. You never told me anything, but I was just like, he wouldn't put me and Eli on the same team.
Yes.
And I was right to assume so. And so I was like, Eli, on your team, you find one person, bring them to the merge. I'll find one person, bring them to the merge. And I was guessing with 13 or 14 players, however many there was, we're going to merge at around 7. So if we have an alliance of 4, we control the game into the end. And that would have worked. And we'll get into why it didn't later. But That was before before teams were even announced, before we stepped foot in any challenge or tribal council. That was the plan going in. And during the breakfast, we talked to Drew. Drew, what
Yes,
was
Drew.
that?
Right?
Yeah,
Drew
so
Rozier.
yeah. I was just yeah.
Drew.
Drew, Mason, and Seth was people who we were talking to, and I didn't want this plan to get out of control super early on. So I had locked in, okay, Mason and Drew for sure, Seth maybe.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's what my I was like, if we take us four to the merge, we literally cannot lose, and that was the plan.
So, why those three?
Uh, because honestly, Drew was the next person to get there after us. And Mason was pretty soon after. So really, it was just a matter of they were there early, and also I knew that I wasn't going to be doing any challenge stuff. I wasn't getting through any challenges, unless somebody wanted to throw, but that was never going to happen. Um, so I wanted to surround myself with athletic people, and
Okay.
so Drew and Mason and Eli, um, they're all athletic, and I was like, okay, they're here early. They got their game faces on. Let's bring this to the end.
Yeah. Okay, so sounds like a great plan. Obviously, we didn't see that exactly happen. We do see, if with that knowledge, if you go and watch the season, or if you've been watching the season, you'll see kind of it seems a little bit out of nowhere. There's a couple of times where you or Eli are talking to Drew, and it's like, well, why would Cameron talk to Drew? They haven't been a part of the same team, and even the swap they weren't together. So it does help give a little context to why you were making an effort there. Um, but it almost got ended before it even began with the very first vote. So
Yeah,
that was really close, obviously, one vote away. In that round, did you have any inkling that you were going to get votes? What were you feeling before the vote and through that whole
absolutely not.
round? Yeah.
So I went into the day, as I'm sure, I think I remember you guys in your like preseason stuff also assumed that I was going to go out very early. And I understand that, and I was right there with you. My only goal, I had a few goals that day. I wanted to make it to the I wanted to get something that I said to be the title of an episode. And I think like optional goal 3 was to win. That was really it. um so I was willing to be the first person voted after the merge. But I when we're doing all the strategy, I don't hear my name get thrown out. We seem pretty like dead set as a team. Anna's out at Advantage Island. It's an easy vote. And then she comes back saying she didn't win. It's like, okay, kind of confirmed it's the easy vote. Um, but then when it's literally one vote makes the difference, that makes it all real. And that first vote painted the rest of my game for the rest of the day. And I was on survival mode from the rest of the day. And
And for those that have not played, if you have played, you understand that's not just like, oh, a handful of hours. That's like 9 more hours,
yeah,
something, maybe 10 even, something like that. So you're kind of hinting at the fact that it kind of makes you reevaluate where you stand. But there are certain people that you knew you could trust moving forward, and certain people that you were like, I need to work to get them out, or was it just more of a general like, I need to make myself more valuable so that I don't get cut the next tribal council?
um, it's so hard to tell because in the moment, like especially since I was so confident that it was going to be unanimous going into it, I didn't know there was enough people not voting along with what we thought that it was literally a coin toss. Anybody on my team, I could look at them and they could have been on either side of the vote. I think I was only pretty sure with Mason because we had that pre figured out that we were
Sure.
going to work together.
Yeah.
Um, Throughout the day, I had been able to gather that Chris kind of led the charge on voting me out. And that in my own personal narrative of Survivor Indianapolis season 5, he is my nemesis. And I don't know until like even when he threw the challenge, I eventually found out that he threw it. I didn't know at the time, which we can get
Mhm.
into that later. But even after I found out that he threw for me, I was like, he's doing it for some other reason. It can't be to help me. There's something deeper going on. And um, all I knew is that Chris was leading the charge. And by the way, I want to bring this up now. I wrote this down to bring up. It is
Let's
so
go.
weird to refer to the like the older players by their first names
First names. Yeah.
because my whole life,
Yeah.
Sonia was my math teacher. She's Sister Mac, and
Yeah.
Brother Henderson. That's who he's a minister. That's who I know him as. So when I have to call him out, it took a lot of mental adjusting. And
Sure.
now I catch myself when I'm talking in a Survivor context, when I'm talking with Eli about the day, I will refer to them by their first names. In any other context, Brother Mac, Sister Mac, Brother Henderson, Sister Henderson. It's weird.
I love
It
it.
was it was it was a hard adjustment.
I love it. So the first vote obviously very close. Second vote, you guys win, so you don't have to vote anybody out. Third vote is the Seth vote, which I find to be one of the most interesting votes of the season, and definitely one of the most interesting like first early like third vote. Like that is a early vote, and if you know much about the boot order of other Survivor Indianapolis seasons, I can kind of go through people that were voted off third. Cameron, not you, Cameron Williams was voted off third. It was more of a he had an idol, and they saw him as a threat for that reason. Then Brooklyn McGrath was voted out third, again, seen as a threat. Katrina Begay was voted off third from the Girls Tribe a few seasons ago, and that was more like she was the least connected that was left. The rest of them were in a majority alliance. And then in the first season, that would have been, I think, Brooke. So there's a lot of like, you don't see someone like Seth, who is, 6'4", 5", seemed to be solid at challenges. Probably had potential to be really, really good at some of the challenges. See him get voted off, and if the episode progression, which I feel like is pretty accurate, it's one of there are definitely some episodes where we're missing some footage, and you can tell something happened, and you're not sure it's off air or whatever. But this one I feel like we got pretty much the most key footage. You go to Advantage Island this round, right?
I think so.
I think you came back late, and you were kind of gunning for Chris, as was Moretta, which is wild because I don't think you two talked this round. And Mason and you are working together. And basically Mason's like, not yet. It's too early to vote Chris off. We need him for challenges or whatever else. And then it kind of comes up really last minute. What about Seth? And you're like, okay, let's do it. And then Moretta comes in the last second to help put the nail in the coffin. Was it more so? Like, walk me through your thought process on that round and how it ended up being Seth.
Yeah. So I wrote down before this interview my two biggest regrets from this season, and voting off Seth, especially this early on, is one of those two things. And uh, I remember the exact like conversations we had that led to that. And I did talk to Moretta one time, and it was during one of the challenges when we were doing the puzzle together.
Oh yeah,
That's when I found out
that
that
was that
Chris
round
was
I
the
think,
one.
or the one before that.
No, because we won that challenge.
Yeah, so it was
That's
round
yeah.
before this. Yeah.
That was when I found out that Chris was the one gunning for me. She told me, and I don't know why I never checked in with her afterwards, or maybe I did. I don't know, but I was still I was still in pure survival mode, and I had kind of made what I perceived to be a mistake because when we're sitting in the sanctuary or the barn or whatever,
Yeah.
um, we're all just talking and we've as a team, and Sonia she's like, wow, Cameron, you're a bit of a strategist. And I was like, oh my, is that am I like I knew I had to go in there strategy first, but I was trying to not be very vocal about it. And so I was like, okay, well, now me being a strategic thinker is already out there, so I can't backpedal, but I also can't be the voice of strategy for the thing because that just makes me look like a big threat. So not a big threat, but that makes me notable.
Mhm.
Um, and so I could have gone out there more. I could have tried to kind of sway things around because I wanted Chris gone.
Mhm.
After that first vote, I wanted him gone, and I think since Mason was my most frequent point of contact, I got the impression that most of the team did not want him gone.
Mason wanted you to think that.
Yeah. And so that means plan B would be who I brought up for the first vote, which was Seth. I was actually the one to put Seth out there.
Oh, okay.
And that's because I looked at both teams and I'm thinking really far ahead. I'm thinking, okay, everyone on this team has somebody that like kind of like me and Eli or brother and sister Mac, they're their other half, right? They have someone that they're connected to on the other team. If we go over post merge and we've, taken out somebody's, friend or whatever, that might look bad and that might put a target on our backs. Seth is kind of isolated in this game in terms of pre-existing relationships, at least as far as I know at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, it's a safe bet right now. Why don't we just get Seth out? Because no one on the other team is going to really be mad about that from a pre-existing relationships perspective. And that was my major thinking. And then I think it was either Chris or Mason brought up, for someone who is super tall, they should be more of a challenge threat. But in the challenge they probably should have excelled at the most, which was the sandbags and the catching and stuff. He, as you guys pointed out in your recap, he kind of held back a little more, probably because he was supposed to be guarding Adrian. But still, that was enough, especially early on when you're trying to think of anybody to vote out. That was enough to kind of tip the scale. Okay, if, as far as I know, nobody wants to vote out Chris, who else can it be? We'll go with Seth.
Yeah, and you say here that you think this is a mistake. So who do you think you should have voted off? Is it Chris or is it someone more like under the radar like Moretta?
Chris, 100%. If I knew that we had the votes to get Chris out, I would have gone for that, because I had already acknowledged him as a possible challenge threat. I had never really talked to him in person, like too much in person before the game, but Moretta was telling me how much of a social threat he could be. And now I know, okay, he's gunning for me specifically for some reason. Let's just get him out of there. And another big reason I regret it is because Seth is just a really nice guy. And I mean, we're like regular friends now. I'm in a D&D group with him. We hang out every month, but it's like, at the time,
No, your thought process I think makes total sense, and I can see why. Obviously, in hindsight, it's different. You're like, well, I got fifth. Why did I get fifth instead of third or second or first? And what I think you had the potential to do here, which there's a lot of things that we've said in the recaps, and a lot of things that I have said in the interviews or I've said in person that are like kind of higher level survivor strategy that I don't generally expect from most of the casts that are not super survivor savvy, which our average player here in our game doesn't watch Survivor. That's been the truth for the majority. You're a newer fan. You've been watching for a year or two now, right? About 2 years.
Yeah.
And then like I know Mason's watched some. So even this cast maybe only had 3 or 4. I think Drew has seen some, but doesn't watch actively. I think Leah maybe has seen some, but doesn't watch actively. So it's like they're tangentially aware. They're pretty casual fans. You're probably the biggest fan. Trying to think for sure. I think you're probably the person that watches the most right now out of any of your casts. So that just being said, I don't expect a move like what I'm gonna say from most players, maybe even this entire cast. But what you could have, you had the option to do a 3-2-1 where you have a plurality instead of a majority, and you get Sonya and Moretta who wanted Chris out, and you vote Chris off with 3 people out of 6, and you just let no, sorry, not you don't even need Sonya if you think Sonya might not go, because she seemed like she was hesitant to do it. You get Seth and Moretta, and then you just let Sonya and Mason vote for Seth, and then Chris votes for you.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-2-1, which again is like that is. And that also, if you do end up getting the credit for that, end up being a bad thing for your game too, because then you get labeled as a big mover and shaker, the way that Mason was labeled a big mover and shaker.
And since I already had in front of the whole team, like, oh, you're the strategist, aren't you? I didn't want to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Push too hard on that.
That makes sense too. If you could have somehow given Moretta the credit for that, or Seth, somehow make him his idea, something like that. But I feel like voting
also
out Chris or Moretta.
I didn't want to run out the gate, second vote for our team going against Mason, because he was,
That makes sense too.
Also, before we get too far, I was, and I will be again in the future. But before we get too far ahead, something else that happened during the group talk thing. Um, I remember now because it's a long day, a lot goes on. It's hard to remember everything, but I remember
Sure.
when the votes are coming out, all of them say like written on the paper Cameron, except for one of them says Cramer, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, Sonia voted for me because the entire Mac family refers to me as Cramer instead of Cameron. And so I literally like straight up, I used the idol that we got and I'm
Yeah.
interview in the thing. I'm like, did you vote for me? And she's like, no. And that is like, I really don't know what's going on now. So
Yeah. I'm assuming it took maybe until the next challenge for you. We know because that was after that. That was after the challenge where Miranda had told you that Chris was a part of it, but you just assumed it was Chris and Sonya and a few other people.
well, once she told me that she didn't, she made it pretty clear that she wasn't playing super hard. So once she told me I didn't do that, I just kind of took her at her word,
Yeah.
and that turned out to be true.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she wasn't really, and I wasn't thinking about her as someone as a possible threat to my game for most of the game.
Sure. Okay. So then obviously you get Seth out that round. Then you have the swap. What were you thinking with this swap tribe? So to remind the listeners, it was you and your brother Eli, and then you have Sonia and Neil Mack together, husband and wife, brother and brother, and then you have Chris, your nemesis, as you say, as the fifth person there. So what we just instant gut reactions to this lineup for your new tribe?
um, it would have been great, um, but the advantage island that we got was it wasn't a game or a challenge or anything. It was just information
Hmm.
about where advantages were hidden on the field during the next challenge. And since we were both put onto um,
Tribe.
the same tribe, we didn't have access to both of them. I didn't have any control over what Eli told people. I didn't tell anyone anything until after the
Okay.
vote because I knew, okay, last time there was a vote, everyone's gunning for me. I need something to incentivize people to not vote me out. And so I straight up told them, I know where an advantage is. I will not tell you unless I like survive this vote.
Yeah.
Um, and when we swap, I hadn't been able to tell them yet because we hadn't had another vote. So I had to, as we're walking past each other, I whisper to Mason, this is where the advantage is. And um he doesn't grab it. So but that's what my main focus was we're not going to be able to take advantage of this information as much as we thought we were going to be able to.
Yeah. So,
But
yeah, that ended up being the case, and it was something that I think looking back on it should have was a production mistake. Was on me and Alex, but mostly me because I'm the one in charge. But definitely, it happened a couple of times where we had knowledge that was a hidden idol, a hidden advantage, something like that. And I thought that was a really cool idea that they've done it in the real show. Um, and I just didn't think if I didn't give anyone the information, there was a hidden advantage that I figured no one would look, you know? So if I don't tell you, tell somebody, then no one's going to look. And I did not fully process the swap happening as a part of that. So it ends up, I don't think it ends up changing a ton. A lot of the advantages this season, like other than Drew playing the idol, to get Adrian out and to cancel off the entire tribe of votes. I don't think there was really ever an advantage that like clinched someone's fate because even the
I would say that there was. I would
okay,
because even yeah, maybe watching only the votes that it doesn't seem super apparent except for that one time.
yeah,
But the knowledge of advantages going around informs every conversation that you have.
sure,
And especially with Advantage Island, since advantages were so abundant,
hmm,
you never know, does this person who's telling me like, oh, I'm with you right now, are they just gonna steal my vote or whatever?
yeah,
But and especially later on, the vote that I get voted out in,
yeah,
advantages played a big role in that.
yeah. It kind of made it
Well, not a big
impossible.
role, but a role.
Yeah, I don't think it changed the vote for you there, but it did make a pretty darn near impossible situation absolutely impossible with a steal a vote there. I think that the advantages, the combination of just the season being called Advantage Island, your presumption is there's going to be a ton of advantages. There weren't as many as I feared there would be. My biggest hesitation of doing this twist at all was just flooding the game with advantages. I don't think there was ever any more than like three in the game at a time, and almost never more than one idol in the game at a time. which is, in my opinion, is one that is the most powerful. So we tried really hard to scale them, but the problem is we can't tell the players, hey, just so you know, this person doesn't have an idol, they have a steal a vote, or they have an extra vote, or whatever. I can't tell you what they have. So then that person can then play it up, or you can in your head play it up. Like you can be afraid, oh, what if they have an idol? What if they have a steal a
Right.
vote? So it does get to you. So I definitely understand that level of paranoia, and just like the lack of information does lead to you kind of running with that as players. So definitely some things that we're going to adjust on that moving forward. But overall, a fun twist. But now we got a little bit sidetracked here. So let's get back on track. So we can kind of go quickly through the Mason vote. Obviously, I'm sure it was tough to see an ally go,
Yeah.
but you probably kind of saw that coming a little bit based off of the
Well,
swap tribe.
at the swap, yeah, it's like, well, especially after I,
You win the challenge, or Chris kind
yeah,
of clutches that challenge with
it's
the
like bittersweet because
sure
like
you
I'm not
win,
gonna
you're
get voted
safe.
out, but I can't see Mason coming back with the other team.
Yeah. And but then we get into what I've been saying is the most interesting vote of the season, Neil Mack getting voted out here. Um, and just walk me through your thoughts this round. Obviously, it's very clear in the episode that you guys wanted to get Chris out. Chris
Mhm.
wins individual immunity because of the twist of the episode where both tribes are going to tribal council. So he gets individual immunity and saves his butt. Moretta gets individual immunity and saves her butt, both of which probably would get voted off in that episode, which is pretty crazy. What is the process that goes on with your group that leads to
Yeah.
Neil versus Sonya?
So I would say this is probably the highlight of my personal game, and also trying to be as unbiased as possible, but still, it's me. That episode of the show was my favorite to watch. But that was also because like the double vote and like it was really cool. But so this was a vote that was informed by the conversation that we had in the barn previous to it because we were like, okay, let's take this opportunity. Let's learn as much as we can about red team because I
Mm-hmm.
know Eli's not going to lie to me because we have this plan. And so let's see what Neil has to say. And he just fully being at a numbers disadvantage on this tribe, just openly is like, yeah, we're red strong till the end. We already talked about it. Post merge, red is sticking together. And so then I talked to Eli. I'm like, is this true? And he's like, Neil has been the biggest voice for this plan, and everyone seems on board when he's around. And so I'm like, perfect. If we can't get Chris, which would be, if I were able to take my nemesis out of the game, that would be awesome. But if that's not an option, then I'm going to make this red team alliance crumble before it even has a chance to get super powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, and again, I need to defend myself. Everyone that I've heard talk about this, you guys on your recap, Ben talking to me about it, Eli talking to me about it, they all get the impression that I was intentionally ruining Eli's game to put myself forward, but in like, which I guess if you want to be all objective about it, yeah, but in actuality, I felt that I was helping both of our games. Sure, Eli would get a little bit more dangerous because he's in a tight knit big group,
Mm-hmm.
but if that red alliance stays strong and they still have Neil Mack post merge to rally the troops, then it doesn't matter what my connection is with Eli, then I'm gone. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I'm also dealing with Mason just got voted out. I need to replace my +1. Seth is already gone. There goes my plan B. I need to weaken this red alliance. I need to find a new +1. I just have a lot going on in this vote. And so I'm like, okay, so I can't have Chris be my +1 because I can't trust him. And then I'm like, okay, let me see if I can somehow convince Sonia to vote her own husband out. So I go up to her and I'm like, hey, what would you think about voting out Neil? And she was so on board. It was like immediate. I was like, okay, that's awesome.
That's awesome. And I think I totally agree with you. I think that like you hear in our recap, we talk about how this really more so of Eli's mistake by not doing whatever he had to do
Yeah.
to save Neil. I think that for his game, he needed to do whatever he had to do to save Neil. That's part of why there's a couple of moments in this season that I have loved that are two of my favorite moments in the entire run of what I've done here. with Survivor Indianapolis is things that you only really ever see in the real show occasionally. And I was telling Alex in the finale recap, some of these things are easy to replicate that you see in the real show because they can be forced. Other things cannot be forced. And to have two brothers, and not brothers that are estranged or like fight all the time, like two brothers that get along for the most part. I mean, I'm not going to assume too much, but I've seen brothers fight a lot, and I haven't seen you guys fight, so that happens. But you guys were planning on working together, and just the game itself pushed you apart and led to a
Mhm.
situation where you didn't want to vote each other out, but you had to work against each other a little bit, and one of you, being you, did what you had to do to win the day, and Cameron and Eli did not. Which is why I have said that's a mistake from Eli there. He had the power to change the vote with this
You
slow
did.
vote. And so it's just that is fascinating. Like this, seeing two brothers who again have no animosity, no ill will, and you would have been thrilled if Eli won the game, and
Yeah.
you would, and vice versa. Like if you were on the jury and he's there, you vote for him, and vice versa probably. So to see the game itself make you work against each other when you had the plan to work together, that is
Yeah.
so fascinating to me. So that's part of why I just absolutely love this round and that episode. It was really great for all that stuff. So tell me from there. Obviously, Eli's upset, and what is the because basically right after that is the merge. You do have Adrian gets voted off the next round, but that was after that was that the same round? No, yeah, that was the same round. That was the same round because Beretta won immunity. So then they were gonna vote Drew. Drew plays the idol. Adrian gets voted off. So now we're at the merge. Chris is in the game. Chris gets voted off here, and then it's Eli, Drew. There's your buff. I love it. So Chris is there's the merge buff. Gets voted off. Then is it at that point? No, no, no. Then Eli gets voted off, and then the returning players come back. So this little like the beginning of the merge. What is like your plan? What's your alliance? What's going through your head? These couple of votes here before we get the returning players coming back, because you guys knew this was going to happen eventually.
Um, well, uh, as, as far as I remember, um, I, I, I wanted to continue. I was like, okay, we got Eli, we got Drew, we got me. Three of our four ain't bad. And I was kind of shakily thinking, okay, Sonya's my new +1 into the merge.
Okay.
But so I thought we kind of had it locked down. And I and Eli has a steal a vote. I'm like, we're pretty much on top of the world right now. Now, I've seen enough Survivor to know I can't be going around saying that. I
Mm-hmm.
can't even be going around feeling that all too much. I have to ground myself and be like, something could go wrong. If something were to go wrong, it would have to kind of come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, out of nowhere, um, multiple steal votes are played. I don't think, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure Sonia doesn't vote with me. And so this game that I thought that I had built up kind of was way shakier than I expected it to be.
Yeah, because Chris gets voted off, and I feel like Sonya was one of the few people that did not vote for Chris. I'm not 100% sure about that. And then all of a sudden, the numbers flip the next round, and you get not blindsided, but Eli is someone you're obviously working with, and he gets voted off. So then at that point, you get two returning players back into the game, one of which being a Siakam player who you haven't worked with at all, and Adrian, and the other one being, again, your nemesis, Chris. And like you just said, you thought you were in good shape because you did have some numbers. You thought Sonya, you have Eli, you have Drew, you have four people, and then you vote Chris off, which you're fine with. And then all of a sudden things just start to shift when Eli gets voted off. So, uh, what do you do? Because there's obviously, like I said, two people get back into the game. There is three more votes before you get voted off that you get through. So what happens there where you feel like I'm good? No, I'm not. But you still are able to make it three more rounds. So what happens to kind of get you through to that fifth place finish instead of finishing at like seventh or eighth?
Honestly, I feel like that vote kind of my game was over from then on. I tried to scramble as much as I could. And I mean, I knew on the day that I was kind of doing this, but even looking back, it was worse than I thought. I didn't really give any information during any of the like day of interviews because I was so locked into the game. I'm pretty sure every single interview that I took, I ended with, "I'm gonna go talk now. I gotta go." Like, I didn't want to leave. I was just locked in the whole day, but I was doing all this figuring stuff out. I could, just barely get by every vote, but that's only going to work so far. So
Mhm.
my plan was just to get by. I tried to kind of fit in with any group that I could for every specific vote, but going into the game with this big plan, um, I had to rely on improvisation a lot more for the second half of the game.
Okay, so like you said, you are trying to get through the next portion of the game, and you do. Now, things definitely get shaken up, like I said, with the returning players coming into the game, which everyone knows about in this game. And like I said a minute ago, the choices, not choices because it wasn't chosen, but the people that do get back into the game could have been better for you. Probably,
Yeah,
maybe couldn't be much worse, honestly. But you do make it work for at least a few rounds. So the way that it plays out on the episode, and the way that I felt like it was playing out, was Sheboy versus Siakam, and it was a little bit of both. There was maybe potentially some cross tribal work at play, but I was not fully aware, as you see in the episodes, of this big best class alliance that ends up winning the day. So tell me, players get back into the game, your reaction to the two people that get back into the game, and then walk me through the process of now who do I work with? How do you end up working with the original Shibwe people, and like what are your thoughts in terms of the different alliances and the different votes here? We start off with Drew being the first vote. So if you want to have somewhere to like kind of ground that, that's where we're at in the game, basically.
sure. Yeah. When it comes to the people coming back in, you asked everybody before the thing. We didn't know at the time it was for something from Moretta, but you asked everyone
Yeah.
who they thought was going to come back in. And I think by then we knew that it was like Survivor trivia things that were doing it, that were like involved. So I was like so confident. I was like, okay, Mason's like the only other person here who knows anything about Survivor. So he's pretty much a lock. And then as far as the girls were concerned, I had no guesses in particular one way or the other. Um, but when Mason doesn't end up getting it, I was just complete. I was like, well, okay, well, my worst case scenario just happened, but it yeah, it was a shock. And then to find like to find out that he didn't even bother reading the questions, he just kind of ran through and just grabbed whichever one, and all of them but one were wrong. I mean, right? Like that
Oh, you mean Chris? Yes, you mean Chris.
yeah, sorry.
Yes, not yeah. I think Mitt Mason. I was like, wait a minute.
Right,
Yeah,
no,
Chris
yeah,
just
that
kind of like
Chris
he just kind of
just
game he kind of just gamed the system a little bit, like as a
yeah,
teacher hack. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, but yeah, it was definitely something. But as far as where I was landing, I knew that I still knew I can't trust Chris fully, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna play to him now.
Hmm.
I didn't know at the time he wasn't fully strategizing until that moment. I didn't know that he was a whole new Chris. Um, I thought he's been playing a strategic game the whole time, but I also thought, um, okay, let me just try to play into his plans because I feel like if I'm not against him, I'll be with him. I'll try to work with him, and that never really. I said this in the show, and um, towards the end there, it was like the vocal like alliance was the blue team strong or whatever. Even when we were just the blue team, that was never really the case. And so it might come across as tribal lines sticking around, but that was never the case, and that was never the intention. He was obviously using that as a shield to block the real alliance. So even when I was, in with the new group, I didn't feel secure. And it was just I think with the Drew vote, I might have voted for him, but I didn't want to. I was just,
Yeah,
yeah, I was just kind of trying to show people, hey guys, here's I'm someone you can work with. Here's I'm a number now.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so, I would assume then that you're just trying to use that strategy as a way of like kind of slowly building back your standing in the game. And then you do get Annie, which I mean, I'm not saying that was your idea, but it was like someone who you're not working with at all, someone who doesn't really do anything for your game. So seems like that's a totally fair, um, like a good moment for you in terms of stabilizing your game a little bit.
yeah,
Did you feel like so you say that you never felt secure? Do you think that you were, without understanding it completely, you were feeling the fact that they were kind of playing you and Sonya a little bit, them being Moretta and Chris?
yeah. I not that specifically. I found it very difficult to talk with the red team, like
Okay,
at all. Any specifically Leah. Anytime I would ever try to strategize with her or even join a kind of a small group she was in, the conversation would change. She would be like, "Dogs, am I right?" Like it just I could never break that wall. And so after a while I stopped trying with her specifically.
okay,
And that kind of to a lesser extent expanded to the rest of Red Team. Like I never really talked to Adrian until the vote that I got out. Um I probably never clicked that it was Chris and Moretta pulling the strings, but I did know I was never in on all the information.
sure,
Uh, so my plan was as long as I'm not at the bottom, I'm fine to be the next vote. I just don't want to be this vote.
okay.
Like just crawl along as much as I can.
And so when I'm not, I don't remember exactly how this went down. So the Drew vote happens. Obviously, you didn't want that to happen, but you kind of saw the writing on the wall. He's a big, huge threat. He had basically everyone
1,000 idols.
wanted
Yeah.
him out. And so then Annie goes, which is again, like I said, not bad for your game. Then Sonya is next, which was probably the nail in the coffin, if not, it had already happened. You just didn't know it. What do you think you could have done anything differently here? Or did you know that? I don't think you knew that Sonya was going to be voted off. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah,
Um yeah, this was just like if all this did was like confirm my suspicions that I think in the video I'm like I'm feeling safe now. I don't know why I said that. But like all this did was confirm my suspicions that I'm not getting everything because I wasn't told she was going to be it.
yeah,
Um, I'm sure if I was told in the state of the game I was in, I'd probably been like, "Yeah, let's do it," just trying to get anyone,
sure,
trying to get people to believe I'll work with anybody. But I was not let into this plan, and so that was just like, "All right, you're no longer a factor. You're kind of in like deciding it the votes anymore.
yeah.
Because if they don't even want my vote, then they're not, like,
Not a good
yeah,
sign. Yeah, not a good sign
yeah,
if they won't even use you as a number.
right."
So like obviously you get voted off next. Before we kind of like just kind of talk about that round, like I said, I don't for you it's difficult because there's almost no way you could have known this best class alliance was happening. When you look back on your game as a whole, what do you think you should have done differently that could have helped your overall standing and like
Uh,
placement?
yeah. So ignoring this round, like this challenge round and voting round, before what I really could have done differently was one, not let the first vote affect my willingness to work with Chris for the whole game because I was so hesitant to work with him the entire day just because of the first vote. Um, and just I was and to a lesser extent now still am, but especially then, I'm 21 now. I'm a mature person now, but back then, little old young Cameron, I was a very introverted person.
Hmm.
I don't know what happened on that day, but I walked into there with the game face on and I didn't let that stop me, but I still probably should have talked more. Um, I should have done more to break through that conversational wall with some of the red team. I should have, I remember distinctly. I have this image of my head of Chris on the hammock talking with Moretta, and for some reason, nothing clicks in my mind where I should probably go see what they're talking about. It doesn't. That will haunt me till the day that I die. But If I want to be, this is what I have said, and I said earlier that I have two regrets. This is my
Sure.
biggest regret.
Okay.
I could have changed the game. I could have probably made it to the final three, and I, because of the challenge. Let's rewind a little bit to back before the day of, back before anything, back when all I know months in advance is, hey, Cameron, you're on the list for the next season. I'm thinking, okay, David Cole Survivor. He's a big Survivor fan. He wants to replicate the show as much as he can, but he's not he's not, I don't forget what channel it's on. He's not Paramount Plus. He doesn't have the budget to bring us to an island and have these massive obstacle courses. How is he going to replicate the show? I find like common Survivor challenges online. I'm like, what are some of these challenges that he could replicate on a smaller scale in his area? And I also watched some of the older seasons again, trying to see some things. I was like, you know what? He's probably going to do that one where they have the shapes and they change them around. I call it, okay? And
Oh man.
I download a Survivor challenge app on my phone and I practice common Survivor challenges.
Oh my
I now
gosh.
know how to do a slide puzzle now.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
And for some reason, even though I called it and I knew that that pyramid thing was going to be in the game, I don't learn it. I forget to learn it, or I thought that I already did, but I don't learn it. And then the one vote that I need immunity for, that's the challenge.
Hmm.
That's my biggest regret
Wow.
of the game. You can
So
believe that or not. That sounds kind of crazy, but I called it that was going to be there and I didn't learn it. And that was the one that got me out.
so that is wild, first of all. Second of all, that so if you win this challenge, Chris was pretty quick, but there was a couple of several moments of hesitation. If you watch the video, he's not flawless on it. And someone that would have the procedure memorized could have been faster than he was. Um, so he was really great at it. Let me be totally clear. In the video, we kind of make it seem like Adrian was decently close because somebody, I think it was maybe Julie, thought she was pretty close, and she was, but she was still maybe a full minute behind
Yeah.
Chris, maybe even more than that. Um, I just like to if someone else said, "Hey, Adrian's close," I'm gonna say, "Oh, Adrian's close." I hadn't even looked over there yet, and I say, "Well, Adrian's getting close" because I heard somebody else say it,
Right.
and to me that adds tension, that adds suspense.
Yeah.
Like whether it's true or not, I don't care. Like, like it's gonna add some fun to the moment, and so really he blew it out of the water, but there was again, like I said, room for improvement. So I don't think it's crazy for you to think you could have beat him if you had had that pattern. Because all it is a pattern.
Yeah.
If you have that memorized, you probably could have beat him. So let's just say you do for the sake of fun. What happens? Because you have the best class alliance.
Yeah. So the reason that this vote was so difficult, and I would say impossible for me to win, is
Hmm.
because without a challenge immunity, Leah has
An idol.
an idol, and Moretta has a steal a vote or a double vote or whatever.
Just steal a vote.
Yeah, there's no way to break through that for someone who's not in the alliance or on. But the what does happen is Adrian comes over to me and she's like, "Hey, you're next. We need to do something about this." And eventually, through talking to people, it's like there's nothing that can be done.
Yeah.
And I even told her, I was like, "You're gonna benefit from this. What are you doing?" Like, but say I win the challenge, and Adrian still talks to me, and she's like, "You would have been next." Okay, I have someone here who's willing to work with me, even though they're in a stable alliance. She probably feels like she's at the bottom of her alliance. That's probably true, um, because if I yeah, whatever what we would have done, I because evidence from the next challenge, as soon as Chris is vulnerable, he's gone.
Hmm.
And so what we probably would have done that is just gotten Chris out. I would have talked to Adrian, probably got her vote. Moretta never told anyone the entire game. I mean, I don't know if she told nobody. She probably told Chris at least, but she never told anyone else about her advantage.
She
I
told
was
Chris.
I was suspicious as soon as she came back and she was like, she said literally nothing about it. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, something's going on there, but I can't ruffle any feathers right now. I can't press on that too hard.
Sure.
Um, I'm not trying to say I'm a mastermind that knew everything, but I was like, I mean, obviously I didn't know what she had, and I kind of forgot about it in the moment, but
Sure.
we could have used that. But those advantages in an idols, even if they're go unused, they're not. They kind of disappear after that round because you can't use them in that vote. And so I don't have to win the next challenge. I think that I would be able to keep playing with. the fact that Adrian feels like she's on the bottom. I could probably bring in, probably couldn't bring in Leah, so I'd have to bring in Moretta to vote out Leah, and she won the immunity anyway. So yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think it's a lock in, but I think that if I win that challenge, I'm I could have made it to the final three. I really
yeah.
do.
The only thing that could throw a wrench in that challenge, which actually could in that plan, I mean, which actually could have been could be good for you. But through watching the video, I'm pretty convinced that the only reason why Moretta voted Chris off at Final Four was because Leah somehow got to her and said something to her. Because her confessionals leading up to that vote were voting off Leah. Uh, with Chris. If she had no plans on turning on Chris, I think she would have lost to Chris and been happy, um, because their alliance made it through. Because the real alliance, because the best class thing is again like Chris was their counselor, Adrian and Loretta were students, and Leah is his wife, who
Mhm.
did work at IBC, but was not their so like really the best class thing is Chris, Moretta, and Adrian. Leah is like a part of it because she's married to Chris and worked at
Right.
IBC as well. So not super connected, not as connected as the three of them. So my perception, which again can be wrong, but my perception was Moretta wants to keep Chris, and I don't know exactly what changed. It sounds like we missed some footage of strategy time, where because Adrian says that Leah had come to her to vote off Chris, and that Chris had come to her to vote off Leah, and then Moretta's talking like she wants to vote off Leah, and then all of a sudden she votes for Chris, and then she's mad at Leah for not voting for Chris, which then makes me think, oh, Leah talks to Moretta, says, "Hey, let's vote for Chris." Moretta does it, Leah does not. Moretta feels burned, right? So, but that could help you though if you win immunity at 5. Moretta does not want to vote Chris off. She has to vote somebody off. Leah has an idol. She steals your vote or steals Chris's vote or whatever and votes off Adrian, which that could be. You might think that's, oh, I've lost an ally. Well, now though, Chris is the biggest target, and if he loses to Moretta, he's still the biggest target.
Mhm.
And so maybe you could vote him off there, or you did have a tie vote and rock draw. Maybe it's you drawing a rock instead of Adrian against Chris. So there definitely are some possibilities there either
Yeah.
way, which is really interesting. I think the final, outside obviously outside of your vote being kind of like open and shut pretty quickly before the challenge, it didn't seem so open and shut. So the final 5 I thought was really interesting overall, and tough way to go where you kind of just feel like you can't do anything else at this point. But still, 5th place is pretty awesome, especially when you were one vote from being first.
Yeah.
Anything else before we kind of just talk about why because you did vote for Leah in the final 3. So I want to talk about that before we head out. But anything else before we do that?
Yeah, I will say, I said this in the video as well, but after that, like in the vote that I go out, there's no real strategy talk, right? Except for
Mm-hmm.
that one conversation with Adrian. There's no scramble, there's nothing. And we were waiting in line to go to tribal. We're just openly talking about how I'm the next one. To be fair, I started the conversation, so
Oh,
it's not
okay.
like they're just bragging about it.
Sure.
But
Okay.
I'm just like, so guys, who we voting? Like I kind of know it's not that there's writing on the wall. It's it was mailed to my house. I'm straight. I'm out of there.
Yeah.
So and I said this in the video, but it was kind of nice to know
Okay.
because I feel like if I was 100% convinced I'm making it through, or like convinced I had a chance, and then I get like blindsided at tribal or whatever, that would probably, I mean, obviously it's just a game, I get over it, but that would probably sting worse than
Sure.
sitting there knowing I did what I could do. I got as far as possible. Like, and from almost being first, I am as close to final tribal as I feel like way further than I ever thought I would get.
Yeah.
And so just being able to sit there and just be like, oh, it was a good run, already
Yeah.
processing that defeat before the votes are cast. I don't have to have that shock. And like, so in the most like cope way possible, it was nice to know.
That makes sense. That makes sense for sure. A blind side or like getting to the final 3 and getting like 0 votes might have been tough.
Oh,
Um,
I would have loved to be in final three. Don't get me
okay,
wrong,
okay,
but
cool. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, you do vote for Leah. And you made a comment earlier that I didn't want to like go off on a rabbit trail too soon about, but you talked about how you found it hard to talk to Adrian and Leah, and I think that we see that in the episodes a little bit where the Siakam tribe didn't really play ball as well as the Sheepwade tribe, and I just mean they didn't do as much work to go and have conversations that were strategy based outside of really Chris. I'm sorry, I mean, outside of I mean, Chris worked with Siakam, but he had an in with Leah and with Adrian through the best class thing. So it wasn't like they let Chris in more than they went to Chris or with so it was different. Whereas like Drew didn't really have a lot of success talking to them. You did not either. We don't see a whole lot with Sonya talking to them, so it just seems like that was a difficulty for a lot of people. But one of the reasons why that changed my perception a little bit is I was kind of under the assumption that, and we talked about this in the recap that aired right after the Sunday after the finale. I talked to Alex that the reason why I believe Moretta won was because she was deemed more loyal. I don't totally buy that, but that's fine. It was just what the jury decided. In that I felt like Moretta played a better physical game, like challenges. Leah was really weak there, obviously. Um, and Leah was really strong on the strategy, and Moretta I thought was not as strong on the strategy. She was more go with the flow. I'll do what you want to do. So she wasn't really making the call. So like that was her weak spot, whereas that was Leah's strong spot. The deciding factor for me would then be the social game, and I felt like they had roughly equivalent social games. But it sounds like your perception was your the way that you received both of their games was Moretta, told me in the challenge that Chris voted for me. Moretta, you worked with Moretta maybe even more than we saw, and Leah was hard to talk to. So then ultimately, why did you vote for Leah? Because I agree, I would have voted for Leah, but it's interesting
Yeah.
because you seem I'm not sure why. So tell me why.
Yeah. So watching your guys' finale recap, it was interesting because after watching the episode and just overall thinking, I forgot who I voted for. And seeing that I voted for Leah, I was like thinking, if I were to do that again, I don't think I would. And so
Okay.
it was really funny to hear you guys talking about how you guys think she should have won.
Well,
Um,
I think Alex in the moment, especially, probably would have voted for Moretta, and I might have too. When she won, I was like, "It's a great win," and I still think obviously she deserved to win. I'm not saying she didn't, but in the moment, I was like, in you can see my reaction, and I actually edited out like a few minutes after. Like I thought it felt more fitting to end on her winning and like let's cut it there. But after that, you can see me. I asked her, "Did you know that you didn't have any votes the whole game?" Like now that like is kind of tantalizing as a fan of Survivor. Is this person that won received zero votes the whole game? But it's
mhm.
also like, so why did she receive zero votes? So I think in the moment, like I may have voted for her too. Through analyzing the video footage, I've come to think that maybe I would have voted for Leah, but I think it's close. So you're saying you voted for Leah, obviously that's video
Yeah.
footage that happened, but you're saying that maybe you would now switch that.
Yeah, I can explain both. I can
Sure.
explain why I voted for Leah, but also why I think looking back, I would have changed it.
Yeah.
Day of, I think everyone knew if Chris makes it to final three, he
Sure.
wins the game. That was kind of set in stone. So when he draws rocks and he's out,
Whew.
that which wild.
So close. Yeah.
When I'm like, okay, I genuinely have no idea who I'm going to vote for. This is entirely going to be down to the arguments they make at the final tribal because Moretta played a strong game, but I, a lot of it was behind the scenes, and I have no understanding of the other two games at all because they wouldn't talk to me.
Hmm.
So I'm like, let me hear them out. They're gonna bring up some great arguments, and this is gonna, but one of them's gonna stick out, and it's gonna like, but they all kind of dropped the ball on the
Yeah,
final tribal.
I agree.
Um, I think Moretta and Leah both played really strong games. Um, and I mean, I'm just not discounting Adrian. I just don't think she really her game matched up from what I know of it, which
Hmm.
isn't much to be fair.
Sure.
But in terms of their final tribal, persuasion, I didn't feel strongly one way or the other. And so all I had to go off of is my conversations with people that they worked with or worked against being voted out.
Yeah.
So it's like once I was voted out, I learned like one of the first things that conversation I had is Annie was like, "Hey, do you know about the Best Class Alliance?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Yeah, that's why you're out." And I was like, "Okay, that's crazy." Um, and Eli was telling me, "Man, Leah was crazy. She was rock. She was like running the show over at Red Tribe. She
Yeah,
was doing.
he didn't even vote for her though.
I don't know.
He voted for Moretta.
Yeah, I don't know, but he was really talking up her game, and
Yeah.
then um and so I was like, well, if I don't have a strong opinion based on what they're telling me, I guess I'll just go based off what other people are telling me. And from other people talking about it, Leah's game seems stronger the day of.
Hmm.
Looking back, watching the show, remembering what I see, Moretta's game was really good, but it was good because of how quiet she kept it. I think she was a great strategist. She was just so good. She hit it from everybody. She
Okay.
hit it from the cameras. She hit it like the it was crazy that no one questioned her on her advantage. Nobody
It
did.
was crazy.
And she was and not only was she never voted for, I'm pretty sure she was on the right side of most of the votes. She she was she won multiple challenges. She knew how to socially position herself to never be on anybody's radar for voting, and it's just that I think is actually an overall stronger game than Leah. uh so if I were to do it again, I would have voted for her.
Okay, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that two things. One, I believe Moretta was on the wrong side of the vote only twice, and both of them were really early. One of them was she voted for you, I think, versus Anna in the opening round, and then the other time was with Adrian getting voted off because of the Drew's Idol play, which that doesn't
Right.
really that doesn't really
She would have been on the right side
it doesn't
if
really count. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like she's in the majority, the idol canceled the vote out. So the first vote basically was the only time she wasn't voting with the majority. So I think that's a great point. And again receives 0 votes. So one of my biggest sticking points is like just time and time again she talks about taking Chris to the end, and I'm like, you will lose. And so
Yeah.
like it makes me question all the other strategy that I see, and so it's something that is kind of like again none of them played a perfect game. None of the people that got voted off before them played a perfect game. So it's always a matter of like what you value in the game, which I think is really fascinating. So I definitely think that like Moretta, Leah, Adrian, Chris, Cameron, Sonya, all these people play great games. Even back beyond that, a lot of people did a lot of things that you know could have gotten them further in the game, could have gotten them to the final three, and it's part of why this cast is super interesting and why this season was really interesting to me. So, anything else before we head out of here? I thought we had a great time and I really enjoyed our conversation, but I want to make sure that you don't have anything else that you want to get out there.
Yes, I do.
Let's go.
Yeah, and I mean this is I've been thinking about this for a long time, this is my last chance. um
Maybe.
I we'll see. I absolutely loved playing it. I would play again in a heartbeat. That's just letting you know. you know, oh well, my kid is supposed to be born. I could probably make it. I could probably make it. That's my level of how much I want to replay this.
Let's go.
Um, but I would like to personally challenge Chris Henderson on a rematch in the sumo wrestle because I went in there thinking I could win. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm probably lying to myself, but
I don't know. I
you
don't
know what?
know.
I think the only way to test it out is to have an all-star cast and then have us do that for the game. Um, I don't know, but yeah, no, in all seriousness though, I absolutely love doing this. I love watching the show afterwards. I watched every recap. It was great. And I think if anyone has the opportunity to, or if David ever walks up to you and is like, "Hey, do you want to be in this?" Do whatever you can to be a part of it. It's great.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. And I've talked to you and Eli both a couple different times about the season, about the game, and all that stuff. So um, always appreciate when somebody is. There's a difference between saying, "Hey, just so you know, I had a great time. I'd play again." There's a difference between doing that and like telling me like once a week. Like that's probably a little bit much, but just just a couple times over the course of a year, that's great. Just let me know so that I have that information. I'm not that old yet that I will forget. So like I said, I appreciate not just like the vocal um like give me your opinion and your feelings, but also just like being willing to watch all this stuff. I know that I'm sure that a lot of it is longer than we intended it to be, but I think for the most part, if you're if for the cast especially, I think it's a lot of good stuff. If you are still interested in like figuring out our thoughts on your game or anyone else's game, so that was really fun. Season overall, I am probably a couple years from an All-Star season, but I am already very excited for the potential of an All-Star season. So we'll have to see what that holds when we get there. But hopefully, you won't miss the birth of a child for anything like that.
Hope not, but I would.
On that note, let's get out of here. All right. See ya.
See ya.